Ngā tira kia o ngā tātou. Kia o ngā tātou e whakakao nei, pei te whakarongo nei ki ene o ngā tuhunga. Me ngā pūkela piroa ki tēnei papa, ki tēnei wā. Kia whakarewa tō tātou koe papa i motu te reo parakia. Anō reira, wīnoi tātou. Can't say Channel 2 anymore. Or Channel 3 because you don't know if it's still going. But just going to have a parakia whakarewa nei to open out. Nō reira, manawa mai te mauri nuku, manawa mai te mauri rangi te mauri, ka wakapuki te mauri, ka whakakape. A mauri oe nei tōwa te mauri o tēnei taurira. O mauri ki ronga te mauri ki ronga te mauri whāputa, ki te whai au, ki te amarama. Ui, wero, tawana mai te mauri. Hami e, hui e.
Tae ki e.
Kia ora.
Tēnā tātou katoa, kei taku iti, kei taku rahi, he mihi tēnei, kia koutou katoa kua taimai nei i tēnei ahi. E te kai karakia e whakawātea ai te huarahi pai mā tātou i tēnei ahi nei ratu mihi ki a koe. Kei te mana whenua, ara po Ngāti Pāto o Rākei me ngā iwi katoa o tēnei rohi, ngā kaitiaki o te Māori, kei te mihi. E te whare e tū nei, te ruma hunua, e rere a koe kupu mihi ki a koe. E ngā kānohi Pākiki e wainga nui i a tātou i tēnei rā, e whakaranga tere aki i tō tātou hui i tēnei ahi, kei te mihi. E te manawa ora, nau mai hara mai ki tēnei kōrero miharo rau atu, he kōrero miharo kei te haere. He uri ahau no Ngāti tukuria ko Anahera Gildea tōku ingoa. My name is Anahera. It's my incredible honour and pleasure to be here and able to facilitate this kōrero for you today with these amazing people. So I'd just like to introduce to you all of our incredible guest speakers today. First of all, we have Nigel Borell. None of these people really need introduction, but Nigel is of Pirira ko Ngāti Rangi Nui Ngai Te Rangi Te Pakatohia. He's a curator and writer specialising in Māori art and is currently curator taonga Māori at the Auckland War Memorial Museum. He has famous curatorial projects including Toi Tū, Toi Ora, contemporary Māori art at the Auckland Art Gallery, which I'm sure many of you saw. The Māori Portraits Gottfried Lindauer's New Zealand, the Young Fine Arts Museum San Francisco in 2017, and co-curating Indigenous Histories at Museu de Sao Paulo, Brazil, Norway. In 2022, he received the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to Māori art, and I'm sure that's not all he's done. Kia ora, Nigel, welcome.
Kia ora. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. It's great to be here with you all. Kia ora.
I te tuatahi ka tuku tēnei mihi ki a koe, ko Chelsea Winstanley tēnei, no Ngāti Rangi Nui Ngai Te Rangi. Chelsea's the Oscar-nominated producer, award-winning filmmaker, and an industry disruptor. That's the most important part in that kōrero. We're producing, of course, credits include Jojo Rabbit, Night Raiders, the awesome Merata How Mum Decolonised the Screen, What We Do in the Shadows, Timia, and mad films so far, Moana Reo Māori, Lion King Reo Māori, Frozen Reo Māori, Coco Reo Māori, and at the moment working on Encanto Reo Māori. She's the director and producer. Please welcome Chelsea.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Nā teira wana ahe, e mara wana ki Tāmaki Makaurau and Nāianei. Lovely to be here today to share some whakawhiti tā kōrero. Kia koutou.
Kia ora. And I ronga i te ngā kaiwhakiti ka tuku tēnei mihi ki a koe ko Qiane, he wahine tua tēnei, he inspiration ki au tēnei, all of these people, engari Qiane, for the kai whakahaere, the kai everything of Nuku, and she is an esteemed Māori Pasifika creator, a storyteller, a strategist, a writer, a producer, award-winning journalist and photographer. She is the creator, as I said, of Nuku, which is a movement championing Indigenous women and reclaiming Indigenous women's knowledge. And that book was shortlisted for the 2022 Auckland New Zealand Book Awards. Stories of 100 Indigenous women. Nau mai hana mai ahua.
Tēnā koe. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ka kiti kiti a koutou.
Kia ora. Kia ora. Well, it's my huge pleasure to welcome these guys, and I know you're all here for the meaty kōrero of putting giants to sleep. So, do we all know who the giants are?
Oh, cool.
Who are the giants? We're putting the giants to sleep. Let's find out. So, in the first instance, I would like to ask you guys, each of you have had amazing careers and amazing experiences working within industry, working outside of industry, working within the confines of Te Ao Pākehā, as māngai for ngā hapori Māori quite often, and basically surviving. So transformational leadership is something that we've talked about a lot, and it often requires challenging the status quo. Particularly within our creative industries, I would like to ask each of you, can you think of a time or discuss a time when you advocated for change within an institution so that it would better align with Māori values or aspirations? And maybe I would like to hand to you first, Nigel.
That's hilarious. I don't know what I'm going to talk about. Well, I mean, for me, the funny thing is when you're a Māori or Indigenous, you are doing that no matter what you're doing, no matter what realm you're in, you are advocating for a voice that's often invisible. So I think that's everyone's journey in some way, shape or form. For me, that's been something that I've experienced professionally as in the visual arts, I suppose. And I've experienced it as both an artist and as a curator and someone who works within the art institution and within the mission of our art histories in Aotearoa. So there's a range of experiences that I think have informed my approach to and my positionality to that question. But for me, I think the big opportunity to test it and to sort of disrupt it came with opportunities when I've been working officially by title as a curator of institutions, and I suppose that makes sense in a way because you're working at the interface of either shaping, endorsing, or rejecting the way in which we do things in those institutions. And like I say, for us as Māori, that's often invisible, or it's work that is actually not acknowledged in those spaces, or it's even knowledge that's not acknowledged or understood. So, the tasks are large and the challenges are daunting. But for me, working within those institutions as a curator, trying to represent ideas and people, not just myself and my own mana and integrity, but the ideas of artists that you are representing or working on behalf of, it was quite a daunting challenge, but quite a huge responsibility. And so I often think about Māori curators with a lot of empathy and sympathy and support, even if I don't know them, because I know the challenge. For me, working at Toa Tāmaki for 5 years and wanting to achieve quite an ambitious show, Toi Tū Toi Ora, which was a show that I interviewed with. I feel like you've probably already heard all this, but to pitch 3 shows when you interviewed for the role, and one of those shows that I pitched was doing a large survey of contemporary Māori art, because as both an artist and as a curator and a writer, I knew that it was sort of essential that we kicked on with that story. So that was my big sort of ambition, was to achieve that. But I also, right next to that, was to achieve it differently. So if it's been 15, by the time the show was done, 20 years since the large survey of Māori art, how do we understand that differently, and how are we allowed to tell that story in a way that empowers us and hasn't been told before? And often, the most pragmatic way forward for Māori is the true and the right one, and this was the case with Toi Tū, whereby it was thinking about the oldest philosophy to these lands, which was a Māori belief around creation, and our creation stories, not just story, was the way in which I shaped that idea. Pragmatic, simple, very easy, but also really challenging, because the things that it represents is a shift in a paradigm shift and a power shift, and how we really situate that art history. often when we think about art history in Aotearoa New Zealand, we are having to navigate the dominant culture and their perceptions of what's acceptable or not in that canon of art making and history. This was turning it on its head and saying, actually, we're going to position it here and centre it in a Māori worldview that acknowledges those ideas that are in those artists and their work as the first conversation and not the second. Again, really simple, but had profound, I suppose, effect, and was quite a unique paradigm shift, although I don't think it really is in the end. But perhaps that's a measure of how distinctly different it was to the landscape that we were working within, that this was such a new idea. And of course it was received really well. But, you know, in amongst all of that turmoil, or that challenge, or that time of working, there's still the challenge and the exhausting advocating of something that's different and that needs to be explained nearly every day. So it's a little bit like our own lives in the different spheres that we work. We're constantly having to educate, advocate, realign it back over here, even if it's in a coffee conversation or a brewing conversation. It's often about realigning it back. So that was still the issue with Toi too. Even though we had, greenlit the show, we were achieving it. We were 2-3 in the way of presenting it. There was still a daily issue of realigning people's thinking to think differently, but perhaps more than that, to relinquish power and let me make the calls, or let the culture make the calls that we're trying to advocate for. I think that was the biggest learning in a way, was that there was a real need to step back and then let us, if it's about telling our story, then that means that we're leading it. So in a very simple way, that's about you taking a back seat and letting me offer that. And I think on reflection, that was achieved to a large extent, but you as public actually endorsed it. So we may have achieved that as an institution, but the way in which it was received by the public, the way in which the public endorsed that, both when they saw the show and then when they saw my exit, speaks to that desire to see it differently. And I think M9 last night was a really good example of how empowering it is when we are telling our stories and centering ourselves at the centre of our own universe, that it doesn't hurt a bit for everybody else either. And like the speakers last night said, that's actually the future for us as a country. So, that's exciting.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Chantal.
Kia ora, no. Oh, kia ora, Nigel. And there's so much of that must resonate with you fellas as well, especially the stuff about who holds the power and the decision making and the obstacles that come in there, and the business of having to justify centering a Māori worldview. I wonder, Tels, would you like to talk about an experience you've had or the way that works for you?
Yeah. Well, I suppose, first and foremost, we are living in a country with imposed colonial systems. So you just have to kind of come to that, well, yeah, cool. So how are we going to navigate that space? Because otherwise it's just really too hard to try and figure out something else. You've got to kind of get in to understand the system, to break it down, to work out how to get out of that system or create a whole new other system. But we're talking about those kind of Māori values or things that resonate with you that you want to try and bring into these imposed colonial systems. And our industry, in terms of storytelling, one of the things I find the hardest thing to come to terms with is in the film industry, because it's an industry, it's the commodification of stories, which really I find hard to come to terms with. And one of the things, I suppose, an incident I had around that was when we were making Merite How Mum Decolonized the Screen. In this country, you can find different avenues to fund your project, and often it's a classic go the film commission route, or you find some other money to support your budget that you've got. So the film commission, if you go over a certain threshold, they want to take ownership. And it was just really hard for us as, we came together as the filmmakers, and we were just like, this just doesn't feel right, because at a certain amount of money, if you want from the government, which really is ours, I still pay taxes, but it's like they want to then take ownership. And the worst thing about that in terms of making that film was this woman already had her images taken, and it was about Matata, and having to fight Gettys, who now owned all the archives, and it just seemed absolute rubbish that we were having to tussle and fight with who gets to own her image. So I decided, well, okay, let's not go at that threshold. Let's make a collective decision that we're going to go under this budget that allows us to have a grant only. But that means that we then all have to work for nothing, or all the things that we have to do that to enable us to sit in a space where there's no ownership from the government, and all the ownership rests with Matata and her whānau. So I had a conversation with Park Road Post at the time, and they were amazing. They were so supportive. And Cam Harland, who forever grateful to that fella, Pākehā allyship, we need them to the max, man. And he understood what we were trying to do. And I said to him, I need you to basically give me a post-production package for that much money, because I don't have any. But as I explained to him, this is why, Cam, I need you to come on board this, because we can't allow anyone else to have ownership over her. This is not right. And he's like, got you, absolutely. Then I had the film commission call me, and I won't say the name of the dude that used to run it then, because he's not there anymore, but absolutely pissed off. And he called Cam at Park Road. He's like, what the hell are you doing? What do you think you're doing? You can't do that. And he's like, why wouldn't I support her and what they're trying to do with this? So it was a really interesting opportunity for us to kind of position ourselves and say, you don't get to own our image or her image or this story. It must rest with the whānau. So that was probably one incident where I think we exercised our right. Probably didn't get much funding from the Film Commission after that for some time, but he's not there anymore, so he can. So that's still a struggle though, we still have the struggle of ownership and commodifying our stories. You commodify anything, so I'm not going to swear. You stuff everything up. Look at water. We start bottling water with anything that's all of a sudden we're commodifying, comes with so many other issues.
Kia ora. Oh, yeah, that's an awesome kōrero. And actually, the whakaaro about sovereignty and ownership and owning everything, I'm just going to hand to you, Ewa. Tāmaki. So I just went straight for story sovereignty. I suppose that's how I got out of that shit. Both of these kōrero resonated a lot, and as I was sitting here thinking, what's my answer? I was like, yeah, it's part of that, and it's part of that, and it's all of that. And I think really in my career, I haven't worked in a lot of institutions, mostly because I'd be fired within days. I'm not a good employee, but also not very good at handing over my mana motuhake to someone else. And I'm not saying that you do that when you work in an institution, but there are rules you have to follow, and I'm no good at following any kinds of rules. So when I started Nuku, part of that was around story sovereignty and mana motuhake, but part of that was also naivety. And I think naivety has a lot going for it when you're in a space, because you don't know what kind of impact you're going to have. You don't know what it's going to take. You don't know how much money you're going to need, but you're going to do it anyway. And so that naivety is really great. But it's quite interesting that you sort of follow this career or this pathway or this kaupapa, and people start saying to you, you're paving the way, or you're doing this thing, and you're like, oh shit, am I? Was that what I'm doing? On the way there? But for Nuku, it was always first and foremost about story sovereignty, about us as wahine, Indigenous wahine, telling the stories of Indigenous wahine. I don't care what a man has to say about an Indigenous wahine, has no interest to me whatsoever. I want to know what an Indigenous wahine has to say about herself, her story, and her words, how she's going to say it, and what's my job, my skill, and my ability to help bring that to the forefront. So when it comes to sovereignty, that's been a kaupapa, or that's been a value that has driven the Nuku kaupapa for however many years, 6 years now. Might look at my baby in the front row, which she's fine of swearing, by the way, girl. And it has been
again, that naivety around, well, this is what I want to do and this is what I know I don't want. I don't want someone else owning these stories. I don't want someone else telling these stories and telling me what to do. I don't want to partner with someone. So in order to get funding for certain things, you have to find a media partner. And, well, ka aroha to all of my friends that are in the media industry at the moment, but look at that. You know, at least I know I can say, well, my kaupapa is safe. It's not in the hands of anybody else. It's in my hands, or it's in our collective hands as Indigenous wahine. But I refused to go and partner and do the things that you were supposed to do. And I just found alternative ways to make that work. And a lot of that, as Chelsea has said in her own experience, a lot of that means you got to do it for free, or you've got to work and you've got to make it happen. But then you have to balance out what is more important. Is it more important to find the money, or is it more important to get the mahi made? Is it more important to have the impact to do the story? And the reality is that I burnt out. I burnt out really badly. So by trying to kill those giants and smash them down, you, in effect, also create pain, mamai, you know, broken yourself in that big fight. But you get to the other side of it and that giant's still lying on the ground and you've managed to pick yourself back up again. So it's not easy, but it's not impossible. And I think hopefully that's something that Nuku has shown, is that it's not impossible. It does take a lot of hard work. There is an institution that I'm currently working with, and I won't say who they are, who have a lot of money. I don't know if they're multi-million or multi-billion-dollar institution. And I'm working with them in contributing to something that they're creating. And it is so difficult to continue to educate Pākehā about kaupapa Māori. It is so tiring, hui after hui, to say the basic communication that you should have with me is the starting point. That this mahi is not tokenistic, that actually you're going to come and go. You as an employee, you as your institution is going to come and go, but this mahi that we're creating is going to be here for generations. And so you need to get over yourself. You need to start educating yourself, and actually you need to stop talking like just because you have the money, you're something, and get into our game instead of us having to play their game. And one of the things I'm quite proud of is I don't care if you're the CEO. It makes no difference to me. I think that's probably my privilege of having run my own business for the last 16 years, is that I give no fucks at all who you are in your ranking or position, because I will die on my values. And that's not necessarily the greatest thing, you know, because we'll have to make money, have, you know, feed our kids and actually live. But that's my personal approach to how I try and kill giants. And I quite enjoy it.
Kia ora. Yeah. And I think that ties really nicely all the way back to something that you said, Nigel, about, and that you've each talked about in different ways, but this notion of collaboration, this notion of allies and what we can do with Pākehā, what we actually need to just hold as our own. I wondered if each of you would like to respond to, you know, ways that have worked in the first instance. What is a good ally? What is a good collaborator?
Yeah, I think, you know, relationships are really key. So your ability to navigate all manner of challenge and distance. You know, often we're talking about the distance or trying to get people to understand something so that they can at least engage in the conversation over here instead of being over there. And then once we're close enough to have a conversation, the listening, the negotiation, the ability to hear is really important. So, you know, I just feel like those are some real key values. Being a good listener, being a present communicator. So you just can't sit back, you know, 10 layers deep with what you're thinking. You need to commit to the conversation. And I think Māori come to that space all the time, right there next to you, because we don't have anywhere else to sit in that conversation, because we're tangata whenua to this land. So there's nowhere for us to hide. Not that we want to, but, you know, our partner on the other side has a 101 different ways and positions that they sometimes present themselves within, but we need you right here. So I find part of the challenge is bringing them right in front of me so that we're having an honest conversation about how we're going to navigate an issue or how we're going to do a piece of work collaboratively. But I also feel over time I've come better at reading goodwill and stretching it out, and then massaging that, making it bigger, and building trust. And I feel like often we have to take the position of nurturing that trust. I don't think we should always have to be the initiator of that, but often we are, because we're actually the ones with the blueprint about what partnership means and what we want that aspiration to look like. So there's no coincidence that we lead it. But I think getting better at honouring goodwill and collaboration and the desire to meet you in the middle, I can sniff that out a mile off when it's genuine, and I know now when it's sort of 10 layers deep and not any use. So I think, you know, making the quick assumption and assessment in my head in real time when I'm working on stuff about how to navigate that is probably one of the keys, but also working collaboratively. So making sure that when people are putting themselves out there, maybe they're not sort of on the right track, but if there's that genuine goodwill, my response is to afi that and to actually stay engaged in the conversation until they're in front over here and until they're doing what I've told them to do. No. Until we're working collaboratively.
Oh, Tilda. Oh, Atauro, actually. That's amazing. Charles, you do have positive experiences or things that have worked really well as collaborators, and just as an addition to that, like, what is a good collaborator look?
Well, we know that there's no good collaboration in the current coalition government. And actually most governments, it's just all of them, they've all been pretty shit really, because they haven't really been good allies or good collaborators. So for us, when we were thinking about how do we contribute to, we'll look at language, for example. Was 50 years on since the petition was delivered to Parliament to have our language in our schools, and still we are struggling, still we have so much trauma. We went to Takiura, not last year before, all crying our eyes out because we don't have our language. We got intergenerational trauma in that space. So we kind of became a bit sick of having to try and go to the government or our funding agencies to produce these things that we want in our language. So we're like, well, stuff you, because kind of like in our own domestic environment, we're actually our own worst enemy. Like, we actually don't have good allyship in that space, because otherwise we'd all be speaking Te Reo Māori. We'd all be having this conversation, I Te Reo Māori. It is the language of the whenua. So, all right, what do we do in that space then? Well, let's just go work with the biggest global giant in the world, because they don't seem to have any issue with accepting that we have an Indigenous language in this country. So while we don't necessarily have, we don't participate in all the big bucks that come from it, and there's not a lot of big bucks that come from it, by the way, or what people call box office return or that kind of thing. It was never our intention. Our intention was always, we must get our babies to understand they can go to the biggest public spaces, which in our industry is the cinema, because that's what we do, and hear their own language. We're not going to get anywhere with our own funders, so let's do it with them. And then you get your allyship by working with people like that. It's this weird thing that we have here in Aotearoa. As soon as someone is maybe like seen overseas, or they're doing well overseas or something, then everyone turns around and goes, oh, can we have some of that? But what we were able to do in that space of creating these products or things for our babies and our young people to hear is that we created a market and an audience that forevermore the exhibitors and other cinemas, like the Hoyts and the events and whatever, like, oh, there's no audience for that. There's no audience for Te Reo Māori content like that, because they've never seen it. So you actually just like have to literally grab the horse and lead it to the water, and like show them there is an audience. We're on to our fifth film, and there is actually no denying that anymore, because we literally have got school groups going, kids, whānau. We're timing it in a schedule where we're not competing against anything else. Now they're like, oh my God, when's the next one coming? Because we are literally showing them here is an audience and a market you never knew existed. So you collaborate in a way where they don't even know that they're collaborating. That's, I think, probably the smartest thing we can do. Draw them in, thank you very much, and we'll take what we need. Yeah.
And, you know, like all three of you actually are incredible industry disruptors in this way. And like your whakaaro about collaboration is really important. And I wonder, Qiane, positive collaborations with Tauiwi. I literally just let that.
Well, I think there's a few things that come with positive collaborations with Tauiwi. And the first is that you need to know yourself. You need to know who you are. You need to know what you're great at. You need to believe in yourself and your mahi. You need to understand, and when I talk about understand your whakapapa, I don't necessarily mean you have had to have been brought up on a marae or on your island to understand your whakapapa. I mean the whakapapa of how you got to how you are today. Your history for yourself. Because when you understand that, you walk into every single room fearless. And then those collaborations, you're almost at an even playing field because they're almost expecting, or a lot of people are expecting you to come in asking because they somehow hold the power. But when you walk in there knowing who you are, you walk in there with your power, with your mana. As mana whenua te Tāmaki Makota, I have a bit of audacity that I carry around with me. So that's I always think if I have to move out of Tāmaki, I'd probably be a little meek person because I can't go, you're on my land. But that's the first thing is how do we show up in these spaces for collaboration, for allyship? What is it that we're bringing to the table and how are we sure of ourselves when we walk into that space? Then we need to find those who are willing. I'm not interested in people that I have to convince to work with me because if you don't get it straight away, I'm not going to waste all of my energy to try and convince you to come and work with me. So you find those who are really willing and able, and you start having those conversations with them. Allyship is a lot of listening. And just as Nigel said, sometimes some of our allies are incredible allies. They know who they are. They are very intelligent. They know what they bring to the table. And then they get very familiar and then they start opening their mouths again. And they get very familiar with you, your mahi and your stories. And so then they start sort of sharing those on your behalf. And you have to go, Kyle, that's not what allyship looks like. You know, what is it you're bringing? What is it I'm bringing? How do we work together? The other thing is fostering safe communities. And I guess it's really about, are you wanting your work to be celebrated in a community that you feel safe in, that everybody in that community feels safe in, or are you wanting your work to become as big can be, but it's going to open yourself up to all of these other things that are going to happen? Is that, you know, what is it that you're wanting to achieve? For me, I love fostering safe communities. I will foster that over anything else, because as you find your safe community and you continue to grow that safe community, your allies come to you. Those people start coming to you. They come to all of your live events. They invest money into your kaupapa. You know, you're not necessarily going out looking for grants because they love what you're doing and the stuff that you're creating so much that they want to come and enable that to continue to happen. So I think those are, for me, those are some of the key things that when we talk about allyship, we need to really think about, because it is incredible doing, you know, being and doing, but it sucks to have to go and beg and ask and almost whakaiti yourself to whakamana the person that you're trying to get to believe in you. Like, find someone who just believes in you. Move on and find someone else who actually just believes in you. And they might only have half of what the other person has, or they might be only able to give you advice. But that's going to be where all the goodness grows. And you foster that so that it gets bigger and bigger.
So, I mean, and that leads really, really well onto the really important subject of putia. And, you know, like, how do you guys, like, often the strings that hold the purse are the institutions or the system? Like, what are the ways in which you guys have navigated and encountered those, and what if you have advice for the audience who are looking to do things, like what are the ways that we need to be aware of, that we need to navigate those funding industries and so forth?
I think, my main experiences are working with it within the institution and using that budget, or helping them to springboard to use and garner other funds. And I think I've come to, maybe I always had it, really happy to spend money, to be honest. And I am not scared of that side of thinking big. I think often we're often feeling limited by the budget we have to work with to achieve an ambitious goal. And I just think, well, it's just about rejigging the budget, quite frankly. And I smile and say that to the director, I smile and say that to the exec team. And and we do find it. So I think money is sort of invisible in some regards, and it's only as limiting as you allow it to be in the challenge of achieving something. That might sound a little bit naive, but to be honest, that's how I navigate the eye on the prize, which is the project. Money can be achieved, and it can be found, and it can be altered, and all of those mechanisms just need to be convinced to alter it to achieve this. Granted, that conversation is sometimes harder and more challenging than others, but to me, that's how I like to look at it, so that I'm not overly compromising what I want to do, but let something else compromise to achieve that goal. It's worked so far, just saying.
Yeah, you need a playing piano. But Chelsea, your situation is quite different. Like, how do you navigate all of the funding constraints and so forth that you need to?
If you can do it without them, do it without them. Because you have to then meet certain criteria or their deadlines or their time frames. And if you're an artist and you're trying to make something, the last thing you need is somebody else breathing down your neck telling you to deliver something by a certain date within a time frame or within a certain amount of money, because you're always going to go over. All those things. Like when we did What We Do in the Shadows, we really wanted to try out what would it look like if we were to distribute this film by ourselves. Because the distributors and the exhibitors, so the distributors are the people who are kind of like this middle team, and they take your product, your film, and they will get it out to the cinemas, to the exhibitors. They're quite important. They do an important function, and they're really, they've got so much power in the room when it comes to, if you want to get funding, say from the Film Commission, because you have to have that entity on board, that distributor on board, before the Film Commission are going to give you any money. You might not even have a relationship with that distributor. Most of the distributors in this country, the good ones, are Australian, the old white dudes. I mean, what relationship do we have with them that would understand what our kaupapa or our story is, or intrinsically what we want to say? There's pretty much zero relationship. So but you can't get that money without them. So and What We Do in the Shadows, we were like, we want to do this by ourselves. We also found private money to make that film. But when it came to the distribution side of it, because that's also, you're putting all your faith and trust in this entity that you probably have had nothing really to do with, and they're going to put your film in the way that they want to message it out to an audience. Again, there's absolutely no correlation between that relationship. So we were like, okay, we're going to do it ourselves. The only reason we partnered up with Madman was specifically because once I realized what all the distributors actually do, part of it is invoicing cinemas and all that rubbish accounting and shit. I was like, I don't want to do that. We just want to take part in the creative and come up with it, because we knew our film. We knew what we were, we had that relationship, so, but we had to put our own money into that. So that was putting our own money on the line. That was putting our own creative kind of nous on the line. But we believed in it, and we ended up being the highest grossing film of New Zealand that year. So I think you just have to back yourself sometimes, and go, we can do it. And in actual fact, we can, and we're better. But they've got so much power in the room, those distributors. So if you do it without them, do it without them. Exhibition is a whole nother thing. But again, if you have to do it with the Film Commission, they will make you put your film in a theatre, which makes zero economic sense. And this is something I would love to change, because
You are going to put your film, they make you put your film in a theatre right up against a Hollywood blockbuster or whatever. And an exhibitor has absolutely zero obligation to keep your film in there. If you don't perform well that first weekend, which you probably won't if you're up against a whatever, Barbie, Oppenheimer, whatever, just slammed it at the box office last year, they'll kick you out. There is no incentive in this, so there's a massive disconnect between what the Film Commission is saying you must achieve, and you're only successful if you're a box office hit. Bullshit. Most of our people don't even live in places anywhere where they can get access to a cinema. So again, it makes absolutely no sense the way the system has been created. And the exhibitors, the Hoyts, the events or whatever, they're like cha-chang, they just make the money, they don't care. There's absolutely nothing, they're not charged with anything. Yet we have to follow the system. So if you can do it without them, do it without them. But when you're in the system, yes, you have to try and figure out how you're going to play the game. And it is a game. Yeah.
Kia ora, kai, tino pai rawa tu e nau I nei. One of the key things that you said there is, about metrics of success. And as a writer myself, that's my industry. So I think I should just inform you all, as a person who publishes books, if I publish a book, I might get somewhere between, with a mainstream publishing company, somewhere between 7 and 10% of the cost of all the books. And if I publish a poetry book, for instance, that might mean that I publish 200 books. That might mean that I get $2.50 or a little bit more. So I think that actually it's really worth paying attention to the kōrero of Qiane, because honestly, nuku is in the most money of any book published in Aotearoa, by Māori at least, if not more. Kia ora, Qiane, pio, kāna. Maybe not as much as Hene Elder's book.
That's really publisher.
Okay, so I suppose I'll talk about that. Actually, I'll get there. There was a couple of things that I wanted to talk about, which was the fact that philanthropy has changed. The whole industry around funding, grants, giving of money needs to change. The fact that other people have you having to write reports about how you've spent their money has to change. I would rather go back to a funder, which I had a great, incredible organisation right at the very end of nuku, and I had 10 more interviews to do before we got to the 100, and I had built this relationship with this funder. They had given me a very small sort of like a remainder before the end of budgets, kind of go, here's something early on in the project. And I just sort of kept them up to date with what was going on. And towards the end, I messaged and I said, I really want to get to the end. But, I don't have enough money and I don't like asking for money. Because actually I don't. I've worked my entire life with organizations who have nothing, whether it be me being employed with them or me doing my own thing. I've always had no money. I've never known what it's like to have the ability to go, we're going to shift this budget here.
They don't have the ability either until you eating.
But I envy people who are used to having access to budgets, because I've never been in any part of my world have had access to budget. And I got to the very end and I said, look, I really need some money. And they came to me and they said, well, we can probably give you 40K. And I went, and then I went down, and then I was at the front, I was like, but I really need 50. And they went, okay. I went, so I had this freak out that someone was giving me $50,000. And then I spoke to a Pākehā, a friend of mine, who went, shit, that's nothing.
Yeah.
And I went, that's the most amount of money anyone's ever given me before. And the beauty about that relationship was I didn't have to go back and write this report of how I spent their money. I went back and said, here's the book, here's this, thank you. And they went, awesome, awesome. And so I think philanthropy as an industry, if it is an industry, needs to change, because the way that you need to ask for money, the way that you have to report on money is bullshit. It doesn't fit. It's not fit for purpose. And my most recent tono for Pūtea was for much more than that, and I was freaking myself out the entire time. But again, it's that knowing yourself and knowing your own value. And at the end of the interview, so we went through this process, you put in your tono, and at the end of the interview, so, cracked a few jokes, had fun with the interviewers. But I said, I look forward to you coming back to me and telling me that I've got the pūtea. You just need to let me know when I can start spending it. And they all just went, oh. And I went, no, none of you are allowed to say no to me because this is what I need. So enjoy whatever you have to do after this, but I look forward to hearing the yes from you. And I got a yes, but again, it's that audacity. It's just that, no, you don't have the choice to say no to me because this is too important. So there are those things. And I think, again, it's about not underestimating the support of the communities that you create with the work that you do. We raised $50,000 through donations on a boosted campaign where we were at number 50 of Nuku, and that just came from people who, again, were within our community. There was one of our friends who didn't like that there were odd numbers, so would continue to donate to round it up every single time. I'm incredibly grateful to her and her whānau, but those are the kinds of communities you want to create. I'm about to move into a Patreon space where people need to understand that you can't just continue to consume goodness for free, because we work really hard to do what we do, just like you all work really hard to do what you do. And we can't just continue to allow people to consume all of that without any reciprocal koha. And that's a tikanga Māori. You don't go to someone's home without taking a koha. So why would you continue to take from them without giving something back? So us creating a Patreon for Nuku, which will hopefully, Lord, this might be the launch. I might have to go home and do it this afternoon so you can all join. It's nearly there. But again, that's about that community and ensuring that we're not just relying on grants, that there's a little bit of pūtea coming in here, that there's, we create it. Would you like to stand up and show your earrings? We again, little bits of art and kaupapa.
Earrings, amazing.
But that's just the not having to rely on grants every single time. And I'm not saying that you might have got them for $30 or $40, I'm not sure, but those $40 pair of earrings are going to create the next thing. But it's about creating that community. It's about them reciprocating koha. I've made something for them. They've given something back to us. And I make it really clear that anytime you buy anything from us, it goes straight back into the kaupapa. So there's all of that. Now, to your other point that I forgot I was going to mention was the pukapuka. So yeah, I self-published Nuku. And it was very much a stand in mana motuhake. There are a number of publishers who came to me who said, do you want to have a conversation about publishing Nuku? And I was like, nah, not really. I'd worked in magazine publishing early in my career, so I wasn't completely naive to what had to happen to publish a book, but I hadn't worked in the book industry. And so I thank you, husband, put our own money into producing Nuku, and then benefited from the profits of that. The one thing that you don't really get by not being part of a publisher is you don't necessarily get to be part of all of the distribution links. You don't get on the Nielsen best-selling lists because you're not a publisher that they track. So even though Nuku is one of the highest selling New Zealand books, it's done really well. It's now been picked up by Penguin for its third print edition. So that manakitanga that we gave all of those stories for the first 2 print runs. And I have to say that I ordered the first print run of 4,000 books. And within 3 months, I published the second print run.
Wow.
And then about a year later, Penguin asked if they could publish the third print run. And by then, I didn't have the capacity to keep that going. But I benefited from those direct sales. And now that I'm seeing it from the other perspective where I get my 10% royalty, it is quite interesting how much you give up to enable yourself to be in a workforce. Because I'll tell you now, workforce would not stock us. They refuse to reply to my emails. And now my book's in workforce, and I'm just like, hey, you're selling it anyway. But, you know, it's those big guys only want to work with the big guys. And I just think, how sad is that you don't get to experience the amazingness of Nuku and my team and the wahine that have put this together. And we managed to distribute it ourselves. Our beautiful, she's now operations lead, Ngaire White, enabled me to take the year off to study at Takiura, and she did all of the distribution from her garage in Hunua. And that then enables us to ensure that this mama of 3 has mahi. You know, all of these things are really important in the financial scheme of things. So it's not just about mana motuhake for the stories, but it's mana motuhake for that individual. And it sucks that we live in a world where commodification and commercialization are the values that people hold highest. But it's a success, so...
And actually, we're so close to out of time, but I really want to ask about a million more questions. But one that I really want to get to before we even think about closing is something you just touched on, Qiane. You know, this work that we do, this intergenerational work of sustainability and capability building and creating opening spaces for others to come through. I feel like with all of you, that's part of the mahi that you do. And I wonder if you would just like to talk really briefly to that. And what are the ways in which that you and your world are able to do that for others?
I think for me, you know, just I've been a curator by title for 10 years, so that's only one part of my life, and all the other parts of it have been informed by community and working on a range of different projects that have been informed by the importance and the value of community. So whether it's working on meeting houses under Paki Harrison, or whether it's been part of Te Atinga and Toi Māori and the movement of contemporary Māori art through that realm, or whether it's just working with my community in South Auckland, the importance of being part of a community, but also the value of giving back so that everyone sort of benefits is just an ethos that's been instilled in us. So no matter what hat I'm wearing and where I am wearing it, that's the bottom line for me. A little bit like this, sitting up on this platform today, you get asked to do something and you don't want to do it, to be honest.
No, it's all right.
But we know why we're doing it, and we know why we're all up here, and it's part of that community and that giving back, but also that generosity that is just instilled in the way we work. So I know with me as a curator that, you know, I've garnered a lot of attention and limelight in terms of the success of what that's happened, what that represents in my recent career. And there's been opportunities to foster younger curators who aren't even sure if they want to curate. So my job has really been about just supporting that young momentum and encouraging it, and being visible and showing up. And that's been quite important. You know, as I turn 50, you know, the idea of mentoring and supporting others is something I see quite clearly now. But perhaps I also see in relation to that role where they sort of see you, which is, I hate that, because it's like, yes, you know, you don't want to sit too far outside of yourself in terms of how you think about what your contribution is, but I can sort of see the way that they're looking at me for leadership. So I think to me that's really key, you know, that we foster that next generation and allow them to think, you know, the walls of the institution don't define us, you know. They're not even visible. They are actually just a stepping stone to everyone outside of it. And I made that transition in thinking when I started at the art gallery, because there was no other way to survive in that role without actually seeing my community outside of it. And that's the way I've decided to live my life within these institutions, is in spite of the walls that they sit me within, because they're not real. And all of my connections outside of the building are what keep me sustained and grounded and engaged. And so, you bring them in and out of those spaces, and you look after them in that way. So that was when that penny dropped, working in institutions wasn't as hard as I thought it was, because they didn't define who I was. They were lucky to have me in the communities that I brought into the space.
Childa, tell us about. I imagine you have millions knocking on your door to get in. Yoa.
Well, I suppose like with the matua media stuff and working with Disney, so the problem we have, and we always get from the film commission, all those funders are all like, we need Te Reo Māori content, Te Reo Māori movies, like written, directed by Māori speaking, creatives. And it's like, well, hang on a minute, we are just catching up. You fellas have been making films for eons, and now you're just throwing this at us. We're meant to have now been fluent matatauri te reo, we're meant to be amazing directors i te reo Māori, we're all the things. So what we're trying to do with the animation space is it allows us to nurture and harness and give rangatahi jobs and see how this works in directing, writing, producing, translations, waiata, because you're using, you have the tools of like this Disney machine. So you're seeing how a good script is kind of written. You're enabling that to participate in that. We're giving opportunities for our reo Māori speaking talent who say like they see a pathway in kapahaka but have never thought, oh, maybe I could be an actor, or maybe I could occupy this space. Because and just accepting that maybe in our generation, at least we are just going to maybe be that capacity building generation, and be okay with it. Like, don't try and do all the things, because you'll probably, like, we all have experienced burnout, but we're not going to be good to anybody if we're all burnt out at the same time. So be okay with the contribution you're making. Every contribution is a step towards the right direction, no matter what it is. So it's a lot of that stuff. And then just being in those spaces, like we know that we are in these imposed colonial systems, and the filmmaking system, we're here. But I wanted to participate in distribution and exhibition because I was like, where are we? We're not there. And even if it fails, who gives a shit? But at least we tried, and at least our babies can see, and now the young ones coming up go, oh man, maybe I could get into that too. Maybe I could be in the cinema space or the distribution space or whatever. Just get in all those spaces, and then when you're in, rip them apart and say,
Kia ora. Take it away, everyone's writing it down then. Kia ora tau. Qiane, when you think about capability building, I'm sure it's everything that you think about as well. So part of what we do, or part of what we started doing with Nuku was having live events. So bringing that kōrero into a live space. And the first few live events were on my marae, because it was about the ability to put money into my marae. So here's how much it's going to cost for you to come. That money is then going to be invested into hiring my marae and my whānau as the caterers, and that putia and that support is going to go to them. As we grew beyond that and started venturing out into other spaces, it was how do we then bring Indigenous female artists, makers, small pakehi into those spaces where they get a free space to come and showcase their wares and sell their wares, so that we have this circular economy going on with Indigenous women, well, not just in Tāmaki, because they were coming from all over. And so one of the things that I try really hard to foster with Nuku is, again, I come back to that community, but it's about how are we supporting other Indigenous women in their spaces? How are we providing a platform, an opportunity, a space for them to come in? And whether that be just to come in and talk about sme o mea, or whether that be to come in and actually showcase the mahiraranga that they make at home and don't sell anywhere else, and here's their one place they're going to sell it for the next 6 months. How is it that we, at them having that opportunity, there might then be a curator in the room. There might then be someone else in the room who walks over to them and says, okay, here's an opportunity because now we've seen your work. And, you know, there are all of these ways that we can be actively connecting people that isn't just, well, it's also mentoring them, but there isn't necessarily one-on-one mentoring or bringing them into your business. What are other ways that we can be providing space to bring other people up with us? Because it's lonely if you're not going to bring everybody with you. The other thing is this year
so that last grant that I said you're not allowed to say no to, and they said yes to, it was a research grant looking at how narrative is rongoa. And that's the kaupapa for Nuku over the next 12-ish months, is how, we see that in your phone.
Oh, that's not me.
Not me either.
One of the two people.
Some way. But, you know, we said, narrative, can't remember what I said.
Sorry.
Narrative is rongoa. So all of that research kaupapa is how and what conditions do we need to create around Indigenous women in order for them to share their stories in a way that is rongoa for them and rongoa for those who are engaging with them. And through that next project that we're working on, I have the ability to build a team and to bring in researchers or younger researchers, writers, or people who want to get into that space, wahine who want to get into that space, and be able to share all of those learnings from the last 20 years of my career to go, here's how we interview, here's how we write, here's all the shit that's in my head that often stays in my head. Here's how we can share some of that to equip, enable, and grow your capacity and capability as an Indigenous wahine so that you can go on and whatever it is you're going to do. So this is my tono to everybody in this room, because I'm always all about the self-promotion and the hustle, is that if you have experience with Nuku where it has somehow impacted your world, please send me a DM, and you can go onto your Instagram now and follow me. It's Qiane & Co or Nuku Woman, because I am looking for people for my team to interview and engage with so that we can help continue to grow their experience and capacity in these spaces as well. And I'm never afraid to ask for that kind of stuff. And I think more of us need to stop going, oh, I don't know if my story is good enough. Oh, I don't know if I should. And just put your hand up, because that is your koha to helping to grow and develop another Indigenous wahine by sharing, by engaging. One of the other things that I talked about earlier was that circular economy. I have so many books in my house. Half of them I haven't read, because I believe in supporting other writers, and I want to make sure that even if their publisher is getting the biggest cut, that $2.50 is still going to them. That anytime I see somebody creating something amazing, whether I love it or don't love it, I will probably buy it anyway, because that is supporting them. You know, I look at my 6-year-old here in the front row who's been trying to talk to me because her dad's not giving her the things that she wants, and she's very hard. But every time you support something that I do, you support her. And I think we need to remember that. And I think a lot of people in this room probably know that. But we need to remember that, is that every time we're buying off someone, supporting someone, going to a show, watching that film, we're supporting those tamariki and their peers to thrive. And if you think that we're fierce and disruptive, you just wait until that next generation comes out, because that's some fierce disruption already going on in my household.
Pai a tāutoko. E te whānau kua tai mai tātou ki te mutunga tēnei kōrero. He tino miharo e nei tangata. We, and speaking of like, go and support your Māori community, Te Manawa Arts Market is on, just over outside an Aotea Square. There's a whole bunch of white tents and amazing Māori artists are out there. This is our Te Manawa brand that we've just soft launching today. This is all about co-creation, working together and centering Te Ao Māori. So we want to make work and make a community and encourage and nourish community and foster relationships. So that is the mahi that we do. We are fostering relationships at Te Manawa.
Anahera, can I just say a few words about Te Manawa? I thank you. I just wanted to quickly say Te Manawa is a new initiative that's really exciting. I was part of a focus group a few years ago where this idea to support our contemporary Māori artists across the disciplines in Tāmaki was the focus of its work, and it received some funding from MCH in the last round of availability that has allowed and enabled it to do the work it's doing. So I'm really proud to be associated with that initiative, and really proud that we are launching today the brand, as Anahera said, created by Tyrone Ohia, which talks about the work of Te Manawa, tauranga one in the house. But this is about living and breathing these ideas that we're talking about. If our artists are about supporting their work here living in Tāmaki, then this is what the kaupapa is about. So really just wanted to acknowledge Te Manawa and the 3-year journey pilot work that's going on with it at the moment. Kia ora.
Kia ora, kia ora. And on your seat, everybody will have got one of these. Help yourself to the others on the other seats if you'd like more than one. They come in 3 colours. They are postcards. Please send them to anyone you like, or write messages and give them back to any one of us. Things you would like us to think about for Māori artists, for the Māori art world, for the Māori art sector. And send this to anyone saying, come to Te Manawa, pay attention, watch Instagram, May. There will be a big, big event in May. Nō reire te whānau. Ho mai, te pakipaki mo tēnei tāwhatawhi and hawa atu. Mi te ki a pōtau no tēnei platform, ne, no tēnei a tāwhatawhi atu. Please stand. E tū tātou, i te kanga Māori, ne, mo te karakia.
Te ora tātou. Ai mo te karakia ka tika kāteri atu ki ngā tohu e whaki atu ana kōrero. Arapunu tēnei whakatau ki whiti ato. Te wārangi te a whiawhi tū. Loosely translated, just once you loose people on the stage. Harsh. Feel the fear, but do it anyhow. Oina te kōrero e whaki atu e nei o nā rangatira. That's what I heard today.